It is the direct upgrade to the original Undying type of the Elementals back in the day of Medarot 2. It is sporting a much more powerful and potent healing type skill and repertoire. It is WDN01 Aqua Nereid, with a kit of Wide Repair, Revive, Rebirth, Sea Legs, and the leg ability of White Mage, which buffs all leg stats minus armor and heavy limit for every healing skill used, stacking 5 times. Now, compared to the original Elementals, which had some very situational use, but still held relatively true to their original intents, minus the transform gimmick of the early games, and translated fairly well into the role of 3D. All of the upgraded forms thus far basically took what each Elemental did best and only expounded on it and made them even better. And Aqua Nereid in this case is most certainly no exception to the rule, with an immensely potent healing repertoire at her disposal to put her arguably on the same tier as a lot of the higher end healers, such as even Particle herself. Wide Repair on the head part is a very, very potent AoE type healing skill that upon use, relative to the amount of mastery of healing on the metal, will burst heal a very large amount of HP to all parts of the active recipient, whether that be Aqua Nereid herself or an ally on the field that had taken damage. And when I say it is potent, it is immensely, immensely potent. Honestly, even higher than that of Particle's Super Repair, but applies to all parts and not just to one and then carries over to others, which means you can burst heal a lot of parts at once instead of having to spend multiple turns having to patch them up over time. Revive on the right arm is a healing skill that upon use will burst restore all broken parts on the target back to 10% HP. Now, of course, while that does follow the same requirement, like I said, at the 10% per restored part, I will argue back, having it even at 10% and in immense amounts of pain is arguably a lot better than not having it at all. And the fact that this restores all broken parts at once means that you can burst restore a lot of parts very easily and swap between Revive and Wide Repair with very little drop in her performance or her current momentum. Rebirth, on the other hand, unlike Revive, which restores active broken parts on an active ally, Rebirth, on the other hand, will fully revive a fallen ally back on the field at 10% HP to all parts. Much like Revive will, but Aqua Nereid allows herself to keep the fight going by bringing allies back basically as many times as necessary, whether until they take home the win or until someone decides to take her out instead. But the really nice coverage here is the fact that if the Rebirth arm is broken, she can always go back and use Revive on herself to bring it back, and she's back in business once again. However, unlike Wide Repair, which has an efficacy based on the mastery of the healing skill of the metal, Revive and Rebirth, on the other hand, do not have any ties to this, and will always bring back parts at the fixed 10% no matter what. Sea Legs means that Aqua Nereid will have relatively decent coverage across most terrains as one of the third best all-round in terms of terrain coverage and compatibility, but often serves to have a naturally high emphasis on evade over speed or resistance. But in Aqua Nereid's case, she honestly takes that and kind of throws that original rule and tradition out the window, especially because of White Mage, which, upon the use of every healing skill up to the first 5, will passively boost her leg stats even higher based on what these numbers are reading. But, to look at the original numbers, with a base mobility of 733, she's honestly not too terrible in the speed department when it comes to Sea Legs. Most Sea Legs tend to sit between 5 and maybe 600 at best, low 700s maybe if it's a really good one. But Aqua Nereid is already off to a pretty solid foot on that upper tier of where they tend to sit. An evade of over 2,000 is really good and expected for Sea Legs as well, so she is going to have a pretty solid time dodging or grazing a lot of incoming attacks. But it is also worth noting that since she is a Sea Leg, she does also have that natural weakness to anyone using anti-sea. Not that you necessarily see it in current competitive meta, but it is still worth noting that compared to Tornado and Anti-Air, which is a very solid combo, Sea Legs don't really have that kind of overt, obvious weakness spam just yet. Melee and shoot resist at 1152 each is very solid as well, as she can most certainly tank hits fairly well without them breaking her too quickly. In terms of the armor department, she's packing about 3,900 for the head, about 3,600 per arm, and 37, almost 3,800 for the legs. Relatively healthy, especially for females, and especially a healer of her caliber. And healers, you definitely want to make sure stay alive as long as possible to guarantee that they can still maintain their usage. All this being said, though, as a pure set score, I arguably have to rate Aqua Nereid probably the highest grade of the version 2 elementals thus far at an 8.5 out of 10. Compared to most other healers, which usually tend to have an emphasis on one thing or another, whether it be healing a lot of HP at once, resurrecting allies, or restoring or burst restoring a lot of parts at once, it's very, very rare that you see a healer that can do all of the above in one singular kit. Aqua Nereid can burst heal a lot of parts at once, even if she only has five uses of wide repair, but she can burst restore broken parts and revive fallen allies basically as many times as she pleases. Because neither of them have any kind of limit, and because they're arms, she can use them as many times as deemed necessary and as she pleases. Sea-Legs does also mean she may not be super fast, and her heat stats really aren't all that great either per arm, but that is kind of par for the course with healers as well to kind of balance them out. But White Mage also synergizes incredibly well with her kit as well, as every time she uses a healing skill, she gets progressively faster, harder to hit, and her damage reduction also will go up considerably so that she stays on the field as long as possible. As mixed parts, very, very easily I have to grade her at a 9 or even a 9.5 out of 10, and I was immensely close to grading her at a perfect 10 out of 10 and a must-have for the mixed parts category. The only reason I didn't was primarily because of the very low heat and cool stats on her arms. While they are incredibly useful skills, and none of her parts are heavy no less, which means she is very, very flexible in where you put her, those very low heat and cool stats might just possibly cost you unless you have someone on the team that can boost those just a little bit higher so you can maintain your speed bonus. But even if you were to use Wide Repair, Revive, and Rebirth as a full set and just swap the legs out, just as long as you can pair it off with something else to complement the incredible healing kit, such as something with Fix Plus as an example, which boosts the heat stat of any healing-based parts, or something to maintain a higher speed advantage, then you absolutely will be cooking with quite arguably one of the next best healers in the game that is not a meta change type model.